Well, good morning. Now, in the previous class on Friday, we were talking about leveraging diversity, and there we had seen some of the important, characteristics of the people who are high in leveraging diversity. We had finally we had started to talk about how to leverage diversity in an organization. First point, we had already seen that the organization should adopt a zero tolerance policy for intolerance. So any act of intolerance by the organization, anybody in the organization should not be tolerated for any ground on any basis. That is what we had talked about in the previous class. We had seen some example of that, like you can say Sexual Harassment Act, or we had seen the SCST Act. All of these are the attempt by the government, or you can say the organization, in a way to create a more respectful organization. That is the first important thing. Now we will talk about a few more of that before we go to the next important competence. So write down now further the second point. Write down, the attempt should be made to utilize the special skills in bracket technical, cultural and emotional bracket close, that people bring with them because of their diversity, in such a manner that it is beneficial for the person as well as the organization. That is beneficial for the person as well as the organization. So this is the second thing that every organization should try to do. The idea here is that as we have been seeing all the time, the diversity, because of our diversity, we bring out certain skill that others may not. Suppose, for example, we are working together, and because of our diversity, I can do something that you cannot do, and because of our diversity, you can do something which I cannot do. So if we work together, both of us, then we can do together which none of us can do alone. Diversity can be a great strength. Diversity can be a great advantage. So this is something that we must recognize. So every organization should try to use diversity as a strength. They should try to use people's skill that people bring because of their diversity in a positive manner for the benefit of the person as well as for the organization. Suppose, for example, as we had seen yesterday in the previous class, that women are high in empathy. Now, suppose, for example, there is a woman working in your organization who is, suppose, very high in empathy. Now, in that case, you can use the empathy of that woman as a great advantage for the organization. So, for example, we can give her a position, for example, where diversity can be a strength. Empathy can be a strength, because empathy, can become a strength also sometimes, it can become problematic also sometimes. So if you give her a work to do where empathy is a problem, then this woman will always feel pressure or stress while working. So give her a post, give her a position where empathy can be a strength rather than a weakness. So the idea is that we must try to inculcate diversity, increase diversity, and through that we can try to make a more diverse organization. That is one thing that we can possibly do. That is the reason that, you know, in America, if you are aware, a few last month or so, a lot of debate is going on in American media, American political system and all about the, well, judgment of Supreme Court in America about Harvard, you can say, University and the North Carolina University. I hope that you are aware of that. So the reservation for blacks and others have been removed by the, you can say, the court here. Now, do you know that what was the ground on which in American universities, for example, reservation was given to the blacks? In India, reservation was given to the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes in India for the sake of historical disadvantage and for the sake of historical disadvantage or dignity maybe. But in America, they are not talking about historical advantage, disadvantage or dignity. They have given the reservation in order to increase diversity in the university, in the campus. Well, it was thought then that, well, it's very important for the university campus to be more diverse, where all the parts of society should be represented so that the university can be more beneficial for all of them. So diversity was the ground on which, well, the American universities had given the reservation to the people who are, well, otherwise not represented in the university system. In India also, this is one of the ground that many people support, even the reservation for the reservation for the women in the, you can say, the parliament, etc. So our parliament is gender wise very less diverse, very small number of, not even 15% of our parliamentarians, MPs are women. Women represent 50% of our population, but still they do not have even 15%, 14% of, well, you can say, present in the parliament. So parliament is essentially a male perspective in a way. Lawmaking in India is a masculine lawmaking. So many people say that we must always try to increase the diversity even in our parliament, where different types of people, man, women, Hindu, Muslim, etc. must be properly represented. That will make the law making more representative, that will make law making more responsive to the people and the society. So idea is that every organization, whether it is a parliament or the university or the organizations, professional organization, they must always try to increase diversity. That will ultimately benefit both the people as well as the organization, the organizational goal as well. That is one important thing that we should talk about. So this is the second important thing that organization can possibly do. And then after third one, a small thing we can write further. Different ways of doing a work should be appreciated. The different ways of doing a work should be appreciated. That is the next important thing. The idea is that we all have ways. Sometimes some people have very unique way, different way of doing a work. So some amount of appreciation should be given to such people who work differently. It can be as simple as we discussed in the previous class, working with the left hand. Because we often see the people who are different from us doing differently than us with a little doubt and suspicion. In order to overcome that doubting, the suspicious mindset of the people toward differences, we must give some sort of recognition that being different does not mean being bad. So let us appreciate the people, let us recognize those people who are different from us. That is one thing that organization at a small level can possibly do. And the last one, write down further. The respect for diversity should be inculcated as a part of the organizational work culture. Respect for diversity should be inculcated as a part of the organizational work culture. So that is the next important thing. The idea here is that organization must adopt a zero tolerance as a policy, but that should not only remain a policy, it must become part of the culture of the organization. How can you make it a part of the culture of the organization? Well, associate that policy with feelings of, say, pride and shame. So if you associate something with the feelings of pride and shame, then that often becomes a part of the organizational culture. So that is one thing that we possibly can do in an organization. So because once something, so you can tell people, for example, make people believe in our organization that we follow a zero tolerance policy, and because of that policy we are proud of our organization. That is one thing that we can make people to feel or believe. Or we can also do something like, for example, if somebody violates this law, like that person B who was accused of sexual harassment by a woman, we talked about that in our previous class, then we can make people to believe that because of this person we are ashamed of our organization. Because it is normally seen that when something becomes associated with the feelings like pride and shame, etc., then it becomes the part of the culture. Then after, we do not have to force that by law, that it becomes self-perpetuating culture, force us, the internal regulator it becomes. These feelings like pride and shame, etc., become an internal regulator in us that make us to do something even when there is no law, there is no pressure, there is no punishment, etc. is there. That is what we can possibly do. So by doing all these things we can, there are many other things also that can be done, but let us not go into that much of detail. So by doing these things we can possibly create a more respectful organization, and where diverse people can work together and they can contribute to the best of their abilities to achieve the personal fulfillment as well as the organizational goal. That is how we can understand diversity here. So that is all about diversity that we had planned to study here with you. Now next important thing that I would like to talk about here, now with that diversity is over, leveraging diversity, and with this you can see that the empathy also is complete that I have planned to study. So only these two competences are important from our point of view in empathy that we have discussed now. And in this model of emotional intelligence that we have been talking about here, Daniel Goleman's model, last emotional intelligence was social skill, and I might have given you the list of those social skills a few days ago at the beginning of this topic, that in this model of emotional intelligence there are 8 social skills are there, like for example influence, communication, conflict management, leadership, change catalyst, building bond or networking, collaboration and cooperation, and finally the team capabilities. So there are 8 competences are there in social skill. We will not discuss all of them. We will discuss only one of them which is very relevant from our point of view, and that is the leadership. So we will discuss leadership as an emotional competence in some detail now, because leadership is a very important competence that is important for us in civil service. Because civil servants are expected to be a leader, there can be some direct or indirect question maybe in this topic here. So that is why we will take leadership as an important topic here. So let us study how can we understand leadership from the emotional intelligence point of view. Now before we talk about leadership, tell me one thing, that when we talk about a good leader, for example, and a good so we often differentiate a good leader from a good manager. We often differentiate between a good leader and a good manager. Can you think of what are the differences between the two? Well, first of all, both of them, a good leader and a good manager, both of them do one thing common. What is that common? Both of them are in charge of you can say, making somebody else work for us. Both of them are about somebody else working for us. So they do not have to do the work themselves. They have to ensure that others under them work and achieve the goal that they have set for. But there is a very subtle difference between the leader and the manager. Many differences are there. Some of the most common one, we'll discuss leadership in much detail, but most common might be that management first of all is a formal position. Leadership could be non-formal. Leadership could be non-formal. What does that mean? It means that well, people are appointed as a manager. People become manager because of the direct appointment given by the organization there. Leaders, on the other hand, nobody appoints you as a leader. Leader is not a recognized post in an organization mostly. So people are appointed as a manager, most of them remain a manager, some of them become a leader. So because of certain quality that we have to show, which we will discuss in the next, you can say, discussion here, some people become a leader, others remain a manager. That is number one. Secondly, since management is a formal position, so managers often command people. Leaders, on the other hand, inspire. How do they do? We will discuss that shortly. But managers, we often say that managers command and leaders inspire. Since managers have the formal authority, formal position, so they are in a position to issue a command which the other people are required, obligated to follow. Leaders, on the other hand, they simply inspire people and let them work on their own rather than commanding them for every small work or not. So there are many other differences are there. We will not go into that much of detail. But at the root of all the differences that you can think of, you can see that to a great extent leadership is a, you can say, emotional competence, and to a great extent management is a rational competence. That is, everything else that you can think of between the two difference stems from this single fact that to a great extent leadership is an emotional competence and management a rational competence. So for example, you can see one very important research was conducted. I have mentioned that research in some other context also earlier, that a very important research was conducted by some people in which they studied more than 180 big organizations in the world. And in those organizations, one part of that study was also this, that who are the greatest leaders in those organizations, good leaders. And they identified the good leaders first of all, then after they made a list of their qualities that which made them a good leader. What are the qualities that makes a leader a good leader? And on that research they found that almost 2/3 of the qualities that the person has, which makes him or her a good leader, are emotional competence. And only 1/3 of their abilities were the rational competence. So in that research it was found that at least 2/3 of leadership is emotional and maximum 1/3 of leadership can be rational. Rational competences are what? They are about IQ and expertise, as we had seen in our previous class. So 2/3 of leadership is emotional and 1/3 of that may be rational. So that is the role of leadership that was found in this. And in some people it was found in that same research that role of leadership was as high as 91%. Role of rational competence was as low as the 9%. So according to these people, these research, that at least 2/3 of leadership is emotional, or at most 91% of leadership may be emotional. So that is the role of emotional competence in the making of a good leader. So that is why we have put leadership as a part of the emotional intelligence, emotional competence. Let us see some of the important qualities that makes a good leader. But before that, I think there is a question. Let me see whether this question is relevant. Sir, leaders are elected. So why are they non-formal, Madan Saha? Well, Madan Saha, leaders are, I will see that shortly again. The people who are elected, well, political leadership, first of all, I am not talking about. I am talking about the business leadership in a way. Number one. More importantly, that everybody who is elected does not become a leader. They are the representatives maybe. Some of them become a leader. Strictly speaking, in the term that we are talking about. So, not all the prime ministers may be a leader. Some of them can become leaders, some of them can remain a prime minister. Being prime minister is a formal position, being a leader is something that they have to show, otherwise they will not become a good leader. So good leader is something that has to come from inside. There is something that the person has to do in order to become a leader. So nobody is appointed as a leader, nobody gets an appointment as a leader. People who are elected, they get appointment as MP, member of parliament. That is a sort of formal position. So, and not all of them are leaders. We normally call them leaders in the way of speaking maybe, but only some of them can actually become a good leader. They are expected to become a leader, as in also all the managers are also expected to become leader, but not all of them actually become a leader. So in this sense, at least leadership is a non-formal position. We become leader because of our. So let us see how do we define leadership here in our national, in our emotional competence. So write down a few lines firstly. Leadership is our ability to inspire and guide. Leadership is our ability to inspire and guide individuals and groups. Leadership is our ability to inspire and guide individuals and group. So that is how we can see, we can define leadership in a simple language. It is our ability to inspire and guide the individuals and the groups. How do they inspire and guide individuals and the group? Let us talk about that. Change the paragraph and then after write further. The people who are high in this competence number one, they form and articulate the larger vision of the group. They form and articulate the larger vision of the group and create enthusiasm among their followers about them. That is the first important sign of a good leader, forming and articulating the vision of a group and create enthusiasm among their followers about them. Now, if you remember, in one of our earlier class, we had already talked about the importance of having a vision for a great organization. So, try to think of it, which class we had talked about, which topic we had talked about. Suppose what I mean here to ask is that, suppose for example, there are two organizations, say A and B, both of them are similar in every aspect with a single difference, that this organization has a well articulated vision statement and this organization does not have any such vision statement, everything else being equal. What is the advantage that this organization will have over this second organization? I hope that some of you may be aware of that. Remember that. Well, commitment was the topic in which we had discussed that. So, in this case, you can see that, so this organization will have a more highly committed workforce than this organization. That is what we have seen in that class, that commitment requires a vision statement. Now, there are two further questions are there which we did not raise in that class or answered. So, there are two important questions are that, what is the meaning of that vision? We simply assume that there should be a vision statement, but what is that vision statement? Number one. And number two, that, well, who are the people who form that vision, who articulate that vision appropriately? Well, these two questions we will answer here now. Now, first of all, who are the people who form that vision and articulate? Well, they are the leaders. So, leaders form and articulate the vision, and managers, technically speaking, are the ones who are in charge of implementing that vision. So, forming and articulating a vision is basically the job of a leader, number one. But what is the meaning of that vision? Let us talk about that also a little. Because if you look at the organization that we have today, today's workplace, if you look at it, then today's workplace has become Today's workplace is highly fragmented. Extreme division of labor is normally found in the modern workplaces and all. You all are aware of that. And in that extreme division of labor that we have in an organization, everybody, all of us have to do small work every day. Our work is often very small in comparison to the total work that the organization does. So our work is normally very small. Very often these works are So very often these works are very repetitive also. These works are very, you can say the repetitive, very robotic, maybe mechanical, maybe same work, boring also very often. So everybody has to do the work that at one point of time becomes very small, repetitive, mechanical, robotic, boring, whatever. So because that ultimately makes people to lose their motives. So what am I doing? There is so small, insignificant work. Now suppose for example, this is the day-to-day work that you have to do. So this is the day-to-day work that you are doing. These are the day-to-day simple work that every day you have to do. Now managers are the people, they focus mostly on the day-to-day work. They mostly focus on the day-to-day work, and they ensure that today this work has to be done, tomorrow this work has to be done, day after tomorrow this, and then this and then this, and so on. That is what a good manager, you can say, ensures. On the other hand, good leaders are the ones, they do not simply focus only on the work that has to be done. They try to find out, first of all, the common thread between all these work that the organization has to do, and on the basis of that common thread that they find out, they see a larger vision. And then after, they connect all that work with that vision, and they let people believe or think that their work may appear to be very small and insignificant also, and repetitive also, boring also maybe, but well, all of them are actually working, doing a small work in order to achieve a vision that is much larger than the daily work that we are doing. So this is what a vision. Remember, this vision is just in mind. It is a vision. This does not exist in the reality. It is a vision. It is just an imagination. It is just an image. It is just a picture in our mind. But that image, that imagination plays a very important role in motivating us that our work is not that small, which we have to do every day. It is actually aimed at achieving a vision that is much larger than what we are doing. So the good leaders are the ones, they see the larger picture first, and then after they show that larger picture to the people on the ground. This is how they create enthusiasm among the people. If you look at, you can say, India, then if the Gandhi, if you look at it, I will take Gandhi as an example of a good leader in all these points, because he was perhaps one of the best example of a great leader from every point that we are talking about. So if you look at Gandhi, for example, then what was the greatest contribution of Gandhi in India? The greatest contribution of Gandhi in India was not that he gave us freedom. People often wrongly tell us that yes, Gandhi gave us the freedom. De di hame azadi bina bhadak bina bhal. No, Gandhi did not give us the freedom as such. India got freedom because of many factors, international conditions at that time. That post World War II, Britain was not strong enough to control such a large country like India. And then after further, you can see that the ideas of UDHR, human rights, etc. became so powerful, self-determination, so powerful that it made empire morally impossible. It hollowed down the moral basis of empire. And because of that, within 10 years of perhaps India gaining independence, every other country in the world got independence in a similar fashion. It led to the decolonization of the world, the dismantling of the empires. So it was because of that India got. Gandhi's contribution was not that he gave us a political freedom. Gandhi's contribution in India was much more than just the political freedom. What was that contribution of Gandhi? Let's briefly talk about that. We will say here, it was this basically. Greatest contribution of Gandhi for India was that, that Gandhi was the person who made India a political nation. A political nation, a political entity, because throughout history you can say India had never been a political nation. So that India was a great civilizational entity, a cultural entity, but never a political entity as such. So that, why so? Because Indians did not bother much about the politics otherwise. Indians did not bother much about who was the king in Delhi. So that is the, so only thing that the king should do is that king should come to us, take his tax, lagan, and protect us and get lost. Don't interfere into our internal day-to-day affairs in our village community, etc. So as long as king did not interfere in the internal affairs of the people, then people did not bother who is the king. That was the reason that so many people were able to come to India from outside. You can say Turk, or you can say Mongols, or Afghans, or you can say many Mughals, Europeans. So many other types of people from outside came to India. People from Central Asia, etc. They all came to India and were comfortably able to rule India without any much resistance, because Indians did not have that type of political conscience that we are a political entity, should not be ruled by outsider. So this consciousness was perhaps not there. Gandhi created that consciousness. Gandhi was the person who made freedom movement a mass movement here. How did he create that? You can say consciousness of nationality, nationalism, etc. Well, one thing was maybe that. And before Gandhi, how did people define patriotism, for example? Now it is said that before Gandhi, people defined patriotism as, well, if you want to become a patriotic person, then only thing that you can do or you have to do is to join the army and protect the nation, kill the enemy, and be ready to die for the sake of the nation. That was the only meaning of the term patriotism in India earlier. But Gandhi said that no, that is alone does not define patriotism. He gave a new meaning of what it means to be a patriotic person. How did he define that? Well, he said that whatever work that you are doing, suppose you are a sweeper, and if you are doing your work of sweeping with very high amount of dedication, very high amount of, you can see, the motivation, conscientiousness, devotion, commitment, etc., then you are as big as, you can say, patriot as a soldier who is dying for the sake of the country at, well, the border. So you are a clerk, and if you are doing your job of clerk with very high amount of high amount of motivation, etc., then you are as big a patriot as the prime minister who might be doing so much for the nation otherwise. So Gandhi said that in order to become patriot, well, it's not important that you have to do big job. You can do a small work also, but still you can become patriotic. Keep your nation in mind that by doing this work, you are making a small contribution in the development of the nation. That feeling is important. This feeling is something that he generated among the people, and through that he created a consciousness among the people that yes, my work is for my nation. In fact, about this particular point, there was a question in the UPSC exam a few years ago, and you can answer that question by using this idea itself. The question was that for a soldier, patriotism means that he has to, well, defend the nation, kill the enemy, and be ready to die for the sake of the nation. What is the meaning of patriotism for you? That was the question. Now in this question, you can say that meaning of patriotism for me or for you, for example, is not that we all have to join the army and, well, become a soldier. No. Go to Siachen. No, Siachen does not have that much of a space which can accommodate all of us. So that is not what patriotism means. For me, patriotism means something else other than what it means for a soldier at border. What is that meaning? Well, this is where you can use the Gandhi's idea, that you can write in your answer that, well, whatever work that I am doing, whether I am a sweeper, I am a clerk, I am a teacher, or I am an IAS officer, whoever I am, if I am doing my work with a high amount of dedication, commitment, devotion, consciousness, motivation, etc. Number one. Number two, if I am following all the can say laws of our nation, if I am following the constitutional morality, we have discussed constitutional morality in our earlier class. So if we are following the constitutional morality in appropriate manner, and finally you can see if I am paying my taxes. So by paying our taxes, we are, well, able to contribute at least little contribution into the development of the nation, direct contribution maybe. So if I am doing all these three things, then I am as big a patriot as a soldier who is dying for the sake of the nation. So patriotism does not mean that you have to die for nation only. Patriotism means also that you have to live for the nation and contribute in the development of the nation in your own small manner. This is what a good leader. So Gandhi showed a sort of, I will say, a political vision to the people about what should be a political vision should be that makes a nation, that makes a country in a way. But vision can be non-political also, like for example, a vision can be a business vision also. Sorry, let's talk about before that. A vision can be a religious vision also. So people like Buddha, people like you can say the Jesus, people like Prophet Muhammad, they were not managers, they were great leaders. Because they had a much larger vision of what should be the spiritual life should be. And they inspired billions and billions of people throughout history to become better people and lead a better life in a way. It can be religious vision. Vision can be the business vision. So people like you can say Bill Gates, or can say Elon Musk, etc., or can say the Mark Zuckerberg, for example. They are not managers. Dhirubhai Ambani. They are great leaders because they had a much larger vision of a business enterprise that they want to create. So it can be business vision also, what type of business organization that I want to create in a way. Or this vision can be scientific vision, for example. So people like Homi Jahangir Bhabha or Vikram Sarabhai or Satish Dhawan, etc., they were not managers, they were great leaders in the scientific sense. Think of it, that take the case of Vikram Sarabhai, etc. So when they started ISRO, for example, then they have very small budget that they have. So small budget that they have that I was reading about it, I hope that you may be aware of that. When Aryabhat first was made, then when it was being carried to the launch site, then it was carried in a bullock cart. That was the type of resource that these people had. They started from that situation, and well, but they had much less. So their work was maybe very small, very less, can say, resource was there, fund was virtually nil. But still they had a much larger vision, and it was because of the vision of those people that today ISRO has become one of the world's most respected and successful organizations. We are going to do Chandrayaan 3 also and going towards the moon also. So that is the thing again. So it can be scientific. These people has a much larger scientific vision that what could be a scientific enterprise could be. So there can be many types of vision. You can talk about academic vision or maybe even bureaucratic vision. Or it can also be a bureaucratic vision. So that is another important thing that we can actually have here. The idea. So any type of vision you can think of. Let's take a small example of a bureaucratic vision. For example, let's think. Suppose there are two officers are there, say A and B, and suppose both of these two officers are in charge of the Swachh Bharat campaign of their city. You know, under Swachh Bharat campaign, Swachh Sarvekshan is done every year. Swachh Sarvekshan. In that case, the cities in India, our towns and cities in India are ranked in a Swachh, can say, index, cleanliness index, that which is the cleanest city of India, second and third and so on. For the last 5 years, as far as I remember, 5-6 years maybe, well, Indore in Madhya Pradesh has been getting number 1 always. Now suppose both of them are officers and they are given the charge to improve the Swachh Bharat ranking, Swachh Sarvekshan ranking of their town in the next year's Swachh Sarvekshan. Now both of them are very good officers, both of them make a proper plan how to make the city cleaner and improve the ranking. Make a very detailed plan, and then after they make a proper, you can say, the division of labor. Everybody is given exact work. You have to do this work, you have to do that work, you have to do that work. And proper supervision is that everything is done as meticulously, as scrupulously as it possibly can be. But this person, on the one hand, along with doing all of that, he keeps on telling his people that, well, by doing this work, we are trying to create a new India. Something like this one. And he simply focuses on everybody has to do the work. Now, in this case, what do you think that will be more successful in motivating people to work harder to achieve the organizational goal? So in this case, we can see that the A, of course, will, because New India is what? New India is a vision. New India does not exist. It is just a vision, an imagination, a type of, you can say, image that the people may possibly have. But thinking about a new India that we are going to create, well, it will create much stronger enthusiasm and show them what is that new India. what type of India we want to create by working a small way, in our small way itself. That will create much stronger enthusiasm in the mind of the people about whatever they are trying to achieve, gain. So that is the idea of the vision, and that is one of the most important sign of a good leader. So that is what we mean by vision, and that is why the people. Modi ji, that question we will let later, Vishwajit. Shubham, sir, what was the kind of emperors in India? Were they dictators? Also, what was EIC, East India Company? Were they also dictators? Yes, yes, Shubham, all of them were dictators. Some of them benevolent dictators, some of them malevolent dictators, some of them, well, whatever, authoritarian. But all of them were, monarchy is normally, emperors normally are dictators in a way. Some higher than the dictators, more dictator than the dictators also. Yes, EIC was also in this sense. Next question, sir, how religious create comfort life? I see it always restrict us to live a comfortable life. It's not, well, it may be your opinion. Ask people who follow the religion. They do feel a comfort in the, can say, the life by going to the religious, can say, ceremonies. Religion does comfort people. As Marx said, it is the opium of the masses. So it makes people to move away from the discomfort of the life, live a imaginary life maybe in a way. But let's not go into that domain. I just gave an example of that at least there was vision, real or imaginary, and it was able to inspire a large number of people. It did help to create a more peaceful world as well as a little violence as a consequence of that. That is the first important sign of a good leader, seeing a larger vision and showing that vision to the people, looking at the larger picture and showing that picture to the people. That is what a good leader first of all does. Second important thing. Write down further. Second one, they step forward to lead. They step forward to lead whenever the situation demands. They step forward to lead whenever the situation demands, regardless of their formal position, and go back to their formal position after the demand is over. And go back to their formal position after the demand is over. After the demand is over. So that is the next important thing that we have to think of. The idea here is that what I mean here is something like this. Suppose, for example, this is the power hierarchy, and suppose you are working at a slightly comparatively lower level of the organization. That is your position. Suppose you are doing your job. This is time. Every day you do your job. At this point, suddenly, suppose your organization feels a crisis, suffers from a crisis. Every organization sometimes or the other goes through a moment of crisis. So at this point, crisis happens. Now, if you have a leadership quality, then you will step forward, take all the control in your hand, provide leadership to everyone, keep on providing that leadership till the time when the things become normal. At this point, things become normal, then you go back to your position and start doing your work as you were doing earlier. It is during this time that leadership is actually required. So you can say, we often say that the emergence of leadership depends on two factors. First of all, situational factor. That leadership is required when there is a moment of crisis. When everything is normal, then even managers can do the job maybe. Leadership becomes inevitable when there is a moment of crisis. There is some crisis happens, there is some disruption happens, some big change happens, or need of change is there. Then only the leadership is required. So that is the first thing. Every society goes through a moment of crisis. Sometimes India was going through a moment of crisis in the first half of the 20th century. So we wanted a change, a significant change, a big change. So in fact, that's it. So first important thing is the situational factor that makes us to that it creates a requirement of a leader. On the other hand, again, second factor is that under this situation there should be some personal quality that the people have, and those people who have the personal quality of leadership, they rise. Because under the moment of crisis, most of the people become, you can say, demotivated. They become demotivated, they become low and they simply sit quietly what to do now. They become directionless. So most of the people become demotivated in a moment of crisis, they stop doing something, they become directionless in a way. But there are some people with certain leadership qualities, they rise up, and after rising up they maybe, well, they try to, you can see, take the leadership, provide the leadership, ensure that the crisis is handled, change is appreciated, is, you can say, implemented, and when things become normal, everything, then after they come back and they start living their life the way they have to, in a way. So that is what a good leader does. Take the case of Gandhi, for example, and this is what I mean when I say that nobody makes you a leader. You are given a position like a manager, maybe you rise up and become a leader when the requirement is there, and you go back to your position of manager after the requirement is complete. So nobody makes you a leader, you become a leader. Gandhi, if you look at it with the example of Gandhi, and you know that when Gandhi came back from South Africa to India, then he did not become leader on day one, leader of the national movement. So that was the time, so for 2 years or 3 years, he visited the whole of the country. Well, he visited the whole of the country to understand what exactly India was. And then after, when he emerged on the scene of national freedom movement and all, then after Champaran, Ahmedabad, Khera, etc., then suddenly he was accepted by the whole country as a leader. That was the time when India was going through a moment of crisis, because, well, India was under British rule and all the earlier great leaders, Tilak, etc., for example, they had already died. So there was a leadership vacuum type of position. Under that vacuum, well, Gandhi rose up and he took all the control in his hand, and then after he provided that leadership when it was required the most. He did not have any formal position much. How many times, do you remember? How many times did Gandhi become even the president of the Congress party? Well, only once. So only once, except for that 1 year, he was not even the president of the Congress party, but still he was the leader of the national movement. As far as I remember, in 1935 or 1930, in 1935, 36, 34, 35, 36 maybe, wherever, Gandhi had actually resigned from the primary membership of the Congress party also. He was not even a member of the Congress party, but still he was a leader of the national movement. So that is one important characteristics of a good leader that we understand here. Second point is about that. This is what a civil servant should also do. When their moment of crisis is there, then civil servant cannot sit quietly at home. They must move forward and take all the control. I have read about that. You must have read these things last few weeks maybe, that in the North India, in Himachal, in Punjab, where the severe condition of flood was there, that many of the senior civil servants, IAS officer, DM, SP, etc., 24 hours, day in and day night, they have been in those affected area to oversee they did not sit quietly at home or their office. They went into the field, suffered a lot, felt everything that people were doing, and still provided the, well, leadership. During COVID time also, civil servants has to come forward. The whole country was locked down, safe in a home sitting, but civil servant has to come out and take the leadership in that case, even sometimes putting themselves at risk. So that is what a role of leadership a civil servant should do. So that is the second important thing that a leadership here means. Third point, write down further. They guide the performance of others. They guide the performance of others while holding them accountable for the same. They guide the performance of others while holding them accountable for the same. So that is, or one more line you can write. They know when to be flexible. They know when to be flexible and when to be tough and they know when to be flexible and when to be tough and assertive. They know when to be flexible and when to be tough and assertive. So that is the next important thing that a good leader has to show. Idea here is that can say the leaders guide the performance of others, that is the first thing, but they make them accountable for the same. That is the difference between a leader and a manager. So a manager, well, guide others, command others and take all the responsibility. They oversee everything, every moment, but leaders guide them and then after let people think, okay, you have to be accountable for yourself, your work. Gandhi, for example, it is said when Gandhi was there in India, there was not even a single Gandhi. Every village of India, every town of India, every mohalla of a town, well, had a Gandhi in it. He had replicated himself in a way. We often sometimes call it leadership ripple effect. Leadership must create a ripple of more and more leaders at the local. So who can be accountable? They should not look for the orders all the time like people working under a manager. They must take the accountability, they must take the control themselves in their hand. You must replicate yourself in a way. That is what a good leader does. And that requires sometimes you have to be flexible, sometimes you have to be tough and assertive also. So, Daniel Goleman in his book Working with Emotional Intelligence has given a very good example of this particular point. He has talked about there was a young executive was there, officer was there. Once he joined as the head of an organization. Now, after joining a few days later, he called a meeting of all the senior members of that organization at a place. Now, suppose for example, meeting was at 9 o'clock in the morning. 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, this person, the leader that I am talking about, he reached the venue of the meeting exactly on time. But he found that nobody else had turned up. He kept on waiting for all of them. First person came after 10 minutes. Second person came after 15 minutes. Slowly, one by one, people kept on turning up. He found that people were late on an average by say 20 minutes or so. On an average, people were late by 20 minutes or so. He felt very strange in his mind, what type of people they are. I am on time, but none of them are. But he did not do anything. He just observed them, he just watched them. He called a meeting on the second day also, exactly at 9 o'clock, but nobody had turned up. When he reached the venue of the meeting on the time, again nobody was there. First person again came up after 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. One by one people kept on turning up. On an average, people were late by say again 20 minutes. Again he was very shocked, very surprised what type of people they are. I, the leader, is there on time, but nobody else is on time. So he kept on observing all of them, but did not do anything on the second day also. Now he called a meeting on the third day also. Second, we can say third day also. And third day also, nobody was on time. That people were late on an average by 20 minutes or so. Now on the third day, well, he did not remain quiet. He told all of them, all the people there, that it appears that you people have some very important work in your home. So what today I do is that I cancel this meeting today, go back to your home, do whatever you have to do today. Tomorrow there will be a meeting and well at 9 o'clock at the same place, and do ensure that you are on time. If you are late on tomorrow by a minute also, then I will see what can I do. And next day everybody was dot on time. Nobody was late by a minute also. Now that was interesting. What happened here? That first 2 days he showed flexibility. He did not do anything. And on the third day, he showed a lot of toughness and assertiveness as a leader. Imagine a situation, and the effect was positive. Imagine a situation, had he been equally tough and can say assertive on day one itself, do you think that effect would have been same on the people? Chances are high that it might not have been same. So idea here is that by being flexible for 2 days, he created what I will say a moral strength for himself, a moral space for himself. Because remember, leadership is always about morality. Leadership is never about the, well, formal authority. That is the reason that I told you, leaders, nobody is made, will make you a leader. You become leader because of your own personal quality. Only so you don't have leaders, do not have a formal authority, an army, a police, or ability to give punishment or a bureaucracy to help them. They lead only and only by the moral authority. Leadership is all about morality. So leaders must know how to, well, create that moral strength for themselves. This is the way to do that. That on the first day, 2 days, by being flexible, he created a moral strength. That taking lead also is a moral strength. Second one, control in your hand, and looking at the larger picture, vision also is a moral thing. So that is what a good leader should do. If you look at Gandhi, for example, you can see a beautiful example of Gandhi in both of these cases. Just think of it. In 1922, after Chauri Chaura event, Gandhi was very tough and assertive when he, well, one single event of violence happening in some indescript place, remote area in, let's say, some part of the country. Well, he took such a strong step that he called off such a highly successful movement there. He was very tough and assertive in 1922. 20 years later, during Quit India movement, well, lots of violence was happening throughout the country. Now, did Gandhi call that movement of Quit India movement on the name of similar violence? Of course not. So, in 1942, during Quit India movement, Gandhi was quite flexible. And during non-cooperation movement, Gandhi was very tough. Just imagine a situation. Had he been equally tough during Quit India movement and called the movement off because violence was happening, do you think he would have been successful there? Perhaps chances are low. People might not have listened to his leadership at that time. So the idea is that as a good leader, you must first of all understand the mood of the people, emotions of the people, agitation of the people, the situation, condition, everything. Leaders must read everything. And what is that emotional undercurrent that existing in the society at that time. And on the basis of that, they should take a step. Sometimes we have to be flexible also, sometimes we have to be really tough also. Problem with us is that some of us are very flexible, but we are always flexible. That does not work. Some of us are very tough and assertive, but they are always tough and assertive. That also does not work. We have to understand when to be flexible and when to be tough. A leadership must know that also. That is one thing that defines a good leadership. And this is what a bureaucrat should also do, that know where to be very tough with the people and know where to be a little, well, liberal, flexible, or less assertive in a way. That is another important sign of a successful, a good leader. Third point. Fourth one, write on further. They lead by example. They lead by example. They lead by example. That is the next important thing that a good leader has to show. Idea here is that leaders, as a leader, we often have to make certain demand of a sacrifice from the people. Leaders always demand some sacrifice from the people. But before demanding that sacrifice from the people, a good leader must make that sacrifice themselves. They must present themselves as an example of making a sacrifice or right behavior before they can expect others to do that. Gandhi, for example, Gandhi demanded many sacrifices from the people of India: give up foreign education, give up foreign job, give up foreign clothes, start spinning charkha, etc., etc. But before demanding any of these things, he did himself all of that first. So that was a very important thing that Gandhi showed, and then only he had that moral authority. I have done all of that, now it is your turn to do. Why don't you do that? He had that moral authority to demand from people, and people followed that demand. This is what a good leader should do again. As a bureaucrat as a leader, civil servant as a leader, well, this is one of the very important things that you have to show. Let's take some example of a bureaucracy as a leader in this sense. Suppose, for example, there is a traffic policeman, and suppose he is riding a bike without a helmet on his head, then do you think that his wrong is bigger than my wrong if I do the same thing? Suppose for example, I also ride a bike without helmet and a traffic policeman also rides a bike without helmet. Both of them are doing wrong. We are violating a law. But do you think that his wrong is bigger than my wrong in that case? Of course it is. Why it is? Because I as a private citizen, I am just violating a law. So I can pay a fine and things are over for me. But he as a civil servant is not only violating a law, he is violating a value system of civil service also, which is leadership. His wrong is much bigger than my wrong. Because I am responsible only for following a law. He is not responsible only for following a law. He is responsible for making other people also to follow the law. So other people also to follow. If he himself does not follow the law, then he will not have that moral authority to demand people to follow the law in a similar manner. Suppose for example, if he tells you or somebody else that please wear the helmet, people may retort back at him that you yourself are not wearing helmet and you are asking us to wear the helmet. So his demand will not have that moral authority. His suggestion or his, you can say, command may not have that moral authority. That is why you can say. So idea here is that a civil servant must always present themselves as an example of a moral behavior. So they must present themselves as an example of law-abiding citizen. Only then they will have the moral authority to make other people, command others to follow the law. That is leading by example. You know, somebody was asking me this question that, sir, if a doctor smokes in public, is he doing anything wrong? Well, from our point of view, we'll say that it is yes. Smoking is bad for health, you know. Smoking is bad for health, but people have a right to engage in an unhealthy activity also. So, but if a doctor smokes in public, well, what is the wrong that he is doing? He is violating a leadership role that he has to play, because as a doctor, he tells people not to smoke. But if he himself smokes in front of people, then perhaps his suggestion to the people not to smoke may not have that moral strength. That it may not have that moral, well, weightage in a way. People may possibly think that he himself does not, he is smoking. So his suggestion not to smoke may not be that important. Smoking is not perhaps that bad as people often make it to be. A doctor also does, why should not I do? His suggestion to not smoke to the people may not have that moral weightage. Or suppose for example, there is a dietitian who is obese. Now, is there anything wrong in that you find? Well, it is wrong because as a dietitian, he suggests people to maintain a proper diet to have a good weight, a good healthy weight maybe. But if he himself is not able to manage his weight, then his suggestion to maintain a particular diet and all may not have that moral weightage, moral strength. People might possibly think that he himself is not able to manage his weight. What suggestion can he, what help can he give to me? His suggestion may not have that moral strength, moral weight. That is a violation of the leadership role. You know, a few years ago, there was an interesting case has happened as far as I remember in Bihar. I hope that some of you may have heard about that and remember that also. What happened that there was a village in, I can say, there was a village in which the school had, the school in that village, midday meal scheme was prepared by a scheduled caste lady. Now, when the upper caste children in the school, they came to know that the scheduled caste women is preparing the food, then they demanded that this lady must be fired and somebody from the upper caste must be hired to prepare the midday meal, which the school authority refused. Of course, that was the right thing to do. But after that, many young children, their parents, well, they stopped sending the children to school. So much so that there was a threat that the school might have been closed because most of the children were started being absent. Now then there was a young IAS officer was there in that district, DM. He did a very interesting thing. I hope that you might have remembered. It was a highly talked about case in the media at that time. What happened that this young IAS officer, he went to that school himself, and then after he sat with, called all the children, and he sat with all the children on the ground, and he himself took his lunch prepared by that lady along with the other children. By doing that, he told them by leaders, by example, that I also belong to upper caste. If I can eat a food prepared by this lady, then what is wrong with you? So for you to eat in that case? Only thing that you should be, so you can say, concerned about is the quality of the food, hygiene, etc. So if this lady is able to make a good quality food, tasty food with proper hygiene and all, then what caste does she belong to? Why should that be a concern for you? So I can also eat it, you also have to. And then after he was able to, well, convince a number of people because of that, we will say that he led by example. That is the meaning of the term leading by example here. So any such example you can think about, starting from Gandhi to the civil service example, you can use that as a part of your answer. Civil service should work as a, you can say, a leader in that sense. And last, finally, you can see, last point, write down. They have a strong conviction about their goals and methods. They have a strong conviction about their goals and methods. They have a strong conviction about their goals and methods. So that is the next important thing. Idea is that every leader has a certain goal, which is called, of course, the vision. And they develop a method to, well, achieve that goal, to achieve that vision here. So a good leader must have a strong conviction that their vision is good and their methods are effective. If this conviction is not there, if this belief is not there, then all other points that we had talked about earlier may not be that possible. That is what a good leader must have, that conviction and all. And this is what, as a civil servant, you are also expected, you would be also expected to do that. So that is, we can say, thing. And this is what a civil servant should do always. So idea is that civil servants, when they try to, well, implement a policy of a government, then they must understand the vision of that policy, and they must secondly, well, have a strong conviction about that vision, that this vision is good, and the bureaucratic method to achieve that vision is a good method to, well, implement that. That is the reason that we will see in a later class that civil servants are expected not to criticize the existing policies of the government. So that is an important thing, because if you criticize the policies of a government, then well, and you are in charge of the implementation of that, that will weaken your conviction, that will weaken your belief, that will violate your leadership role as a civil servant. So this is what a civil servant should do. So whenever there is a question on the leadership, that what is leadership, or there can be a question that a civil servant should, you can say, should act as a leader, not as a manager, then what is leadership means for you. Talk about all these points with an example of civil service which I had talked about in all these points. So this is one important topic that we have to understand. So that is all about the leadership. But before we talk about next, let us talk about some Alok. Excellency in public administration is to promote development in local area through the bureaucrats. Is it under political vision or bureaucratic vision? Well, it is I can say, excellency in public administration, it can be a combination of both of that, because I can say political vision and bureaucratic vision are very intertwined with each other. Political vision is more about creating a vision, and bureaucratic vision is more focused on the implementation of that vision. Bureaucracy is more about method, and politics is more about the vision, but they are very closely related to each other. They have to work together. Next question, Shubhra Bairagya, Nadia. Sir, what will best study material for GS4? Are class notes, KSG ethics booklet, 4th ARC report and newspaper enough for us, or do we need to study lexicon? Subbarao, yes, this will be enough. You had already written it, Subrata, that class notes, KSG ethics booklet and the 4th report of ARC, 4th report of 2nd ARC. These three are enough. Newspapers, of course. So except for them, you don't have to read anything else. They are enough for us to prepare for that. Nimai, sir, theory part has been completed, but there are some topics like Gandhi and ethics. Gandhi and ethics, Nimai, we have been talking about throughout our course. We have mentioned at different places about Gandhi. Today also I talked about Gandhi and ideas. We have talked about Gandhi in many other class earlier also. So I did not discuss Gandhi and ethics separately as a topic, but we have mentioned that. Dalai Lama's ethics, there is nothing called Dalai Lama's ethics. Dalai Lama's ethics was not a question, it was a quotation. That quotation can be of anything. You can answer that question on the basis of, well, ideas that we have discussed in our class. How we will discuss that later. But remember that any quotation can be answered on the basis of these ideas. We will discuss some of the questions also later on. So that is one thing. Buddha's ethics is there, Dalai Lama's ethics is not as such. Buddha's ethics that we have discussed in two class, enlightenment of Buddha and mindfulness of Buddha. Both of them are Buddha's ethics in a way. So Dalai Lama's ethics was not a question, it was a quotation only. Or if it is a question directly Dalai Lama's ethics, then that is more like Buddha's ethics in a way. Dalai Lama is a Buddhist, he is simply trying to promote the Buddhist ideas. So that is all about the, you can see the leadership, that is also all about the, can say emotional intelligence, and that is also all about the aptitude. Aptitude is another chapter in your, you can say, syllabus, which I told you that we will be doing only as a part of the emotional intelligence. So all these competencies that we have discussed like leadership, etc., they are the aptitude of civil service as well. So that is what we had already talked about. So one major part of your course is complete with this now. Now next important thing that I will like to talk about is, right, the next important topic, altogether different topic, think of it, write down further, is social influence. Social influence. Write down a few lines. Social influence is a process in which we change our behavior. Social influence is a process in which we change our behavior because of the direct or indirect influence of other people or group. Direct or indirect influence of other people or group. So that is how we can define the social influence. But before we talk about social influence, let us talk about some, you can say, general ideas about ethics normally. What we have, before we discuss this thing again, idea is that what is the ultimate purpose of ethics? What is it that ethics try to accomplish in the human life, or study in a way? We often see that when we study ethics, then our ultimate purpose throughout, starting from our course, philosophy part till today, the purpose of ethics is essentially to understand the causes of, determinants of human behavior. What makes people to do something what they do? What are the causes of human behavior? Now, if you look at the causes of human behavior, then almost every behavior that we do in our life can be determined by one or more of the 5 important factors. So, there are 5 important things which determine our behavior. What are these 5 things? Well, first important thing is the reason. So first important factor that determines our behavior is reason. First of all, that we reason out, and then on the basis of that we do something else. In our class, we have philosophy class, we discussed about the reason, various types of reason: utilitarian reason, libertarian reason, Kantian reason, existential reason, virtue based reason, even the social contract as a reason. So we had talked about different types of reasoning, that what makes to do us to do something or the other. Second important factor of our behavior, cause of our behavior, could be our emotions. So we feel and then after do. Emotions also make us to do many things. Emotions often make us to do something by strong emotion like fear or anger, or weaker emotional undercurrents like intuition or impulse, etc. That also make us to do something or the other. We have studied emotions and the relationship between the emotion and reason in our emotional intelligence classes. Then after, we can see third important cause of human behavior is attitude, which we will discuss in our next class. Next important cause of human behavior is the other people around us. Other people around us. So there are people around us who also make us to do something. Just think of it, that I have seen many people very strangely, or very, you can say, problematically sometimes. There are many people in North India who, suppose for example, when they are in a railway station, a bus stand, in a public park, etc., well, they can even spit on the ground without caring that how unclean it appears, how bad it looks. They don't care about the cleanliness at all when they are in a railway station. Same person, when he or she goes into a say airport, or you can say in a shopping mall, for example, then they can say eat a chocolate and keep a wrapper in the chocolate in their pocket and look for a dustbin rather than throwing that on the ground. What happens? Same person who was so unconcerned about the cleanliness when he was in the railway station, how is that he becomes so concerned about the cleanliness in an airport, in a shopping mall? Well, it is the people around. So when he does the same thing on a shopping mall, then people will look at him with a tilted eye, and this tilted eye, will see the power of that tilted eye in the whole rest of the class today. That can be extremely strong and powerful sometimes, because in order to avoid the gaze of the people, well, we simply do what does not invite that gaze. Other people influence our behavior very strongly. Fourth, and then finally, you can see the social institutions. Social institutions that we are a part of. We are members of many social institutions, family first, school, college, university, workplace. So we are members of different social institutions. And within the confines of that institution, our behavior often changes. So we behave very differently when we are a member of our family inside. We are very different when we are in the school, college, in the friend circle, in a workplace. So at different places, our behavior often changes. So social institution also has a strong influence, a strong impact on our behavior normally. That is the fifth importance. Almost everything that you do in your life is determined by one or more of these five important factors, five determinants of human behavior. Now, out of these five things, if you look at it, these three are inside us. Reason happens in our mind, emotions happen in our mind and body, and attitude also happens in our mind, which we will see in the next class. So, all these three things are inside us. So, we sometimes often call them as constitutional factors. We sometimes call them as constitutional factors. These two, on the other hand, they are outsiders, they are not insiders. Because of that, we often call these two things as situational factors. We call them as situational factors. So finally, you can see here that human behavior can be determined by everything that a human being does may be the result of these two set of factors, constitutional factors and situational factors. Constitutional factors are what? Well, these factors are who we are. And situational factors are not about who we are, This factor is more about where we are. So who and where, both of them determine our behavior. So who we are, of course that influence who we, you can say how do we behave, but where we are also influences our behavior as to what we do. So that is what we call this thing is. So in this sense you can see that now if social influence that we are going to talk about in the rest of the class today, well, is an attempt to understand the situational factors as a determinant of human behavior. This idea tells us that our behavior is more determined by who we are, where we are, rather than who we are. So if you can control the situational factors, then we can understand human behavior, we can predict human behavior, and we can control human behavior as well. Because in many situations, individual constitution does not matter much who we are. Situational factors are more powerful determinant of you. Just think of it. Suppose you are in a classroom. Then when you are in a classroom, then well, who you are does not matter much. All the students inside the classroom behave more or less in a similar manner. So in constitution becomes totally irrelevant in that case. Me also as a teacher, for example, well, in a classroom, what is my personal inclination, morality, liking, disliking, etc., that becomes subservient, that becomes totally, well, undermined in my me being a teacher in a classroom. In that classroom, every teacher behaves more or less similar, irrespective of who that teacher is. Similarly, every student behaves more or less similarly inside the classroom, irrespective of who that student is. So in these cases, situational factors becomes more overpowering over us, on us, than the constitutional factors. So these people will say that if you have to understand human behavior well, then forget about the constitutional factors, focus more on understanding the situational factor. What are those factors in the situation that make us to do something or the other, good or bad? What makes good people or bad people? Situation may determine more. Now, this idea of social influence, as we will see throughout the class today, this idea of social influence has cast a serious question mark on the way the philosophers throughout the history, you can say, the societies have tried to understand the human nature and human behavior. What was that? Throughout history, every culture you can see, the way we have to try to understand the human beings and our society is that people think that most of the people in the society are good people. Most of us are good people normally. So most of the people in the society are good people, but the problem is that there are some people in the society who are bad. They are the unethical people, they are the criminals, they are the bad people. And these so-called bad people, well, create troubles for the good people in the society, otherwise who are so good. So they are the bad people, they are the troublemakers, they are the, well, problematic people. Now how can you make a better society? Now this idea, old idea, this idea tells us that if you have to make a better society, then identify who these bad people are. And once you can identify them, then isolate them. Separate them from the general population, put them in jail, send them to the concentration camp, throw them into the Bay of Bengal, kill them, send them to Pakistan, whatever you have to do. So, well, and if you can remove all of them from the society, then we are left only with the good people, and the society will remain good after that. That is how you can say the society has often tried to conceptualize the good and the bad. In every culture, you know that these so-called bad people have a special name. In traditional Indian culture, these people were called the people like you can say Rakshas, Daitya, Danav, etc. So they are all called, you can say, and they must be killed. So Ravan must be killed in order to make the society better, and for that Ram must take avatar for that. Well, Krishna must take avatar to kill, well, you can say the Kansa and you can say Jarasandh. Durga must take avatar to kill Mahishasur, or Hiranyakashipu must be killed by Narsingh avatar. And after these Rakshasas are killed, these bad people are killed, then society will remain good forever. So in India, we have a special name for these people in the traditional cultural lexicon. In Western world, you can say these bad people were called, you can say Satan, devil, monsters, witches. They must be killed, they must be burnt alive. They are the bad people. So everywhere in the world, we have a special name for such bad people, so called. And well, people often thought that they must be isolated and they must be killed. Then only you can make a good society with the good people always. Now, this paradigm of social influence that we are now going to talk about, it casts a serious question mark on this conceptualization of the human nature and human society. This idea tells us that, well, there is a thing called good people and bad people. If there is something good and bad, then there is only a good situation and there is only a bad. There is only a good situation and there is only a bad situation. This is what we can see this idea tells us. And anybody who is put in a good situation will become good person, and somebody who is put in a bad situation becomes a bad person. So we are the good people normally not because there is something constitutionally good in us. We are good people only because we are fortunate that we have been in a good situation, like a good family, a good schooling, a good neighborhood, a good cultural practice, etc., etc. And these bad people are bad not because there is something inherently or constitutionally bad in them. They are bad people because, well, they are just unfortunate that they have grown up in a so-called bad situation. So a bad dysfunctional family, maybe a bad schooling, a bad neighborhood, bad subculture, etc. And if the so-called good people, if we are put into that bad situation, chances are high that we can become as bad as anybody else, any of them. And if they are put into the good situation like ours, they can become as good as, well, we are. So there is nothing called good people and bad people. There are only good situation and bad situation. Situation makes us good or bad. As Philip Zimbardo said, Philip Zimbardo is one of the most important researcher in this area, who had written a beautiful book called The Lucifer Effect. The Lucifer Effect. In that book, he has written that there is nothing. He has given a metaphor that he had used there very often in that book. He has said that there is nothing called good apple and bad apple. There are only good barrel and bad barrel. So any apple goes into a good barrel will remain good apple, and the same apple put into a bad barrel, it will become rotten. Human beings are just like that. So if we are put in the good situation, good barrel, then we will become, well, remain good. And if we are the same people are put into the bad situation, bad barrel, then we all can become as rotten as anybody else. So this is the whole idea of the social influence here. Good and bad is not about the constitution, good and bad is more about the situation. If you take this paradigm, then you will see that this idea tells us that there is so much of corruption exists in our country, in bureaucracy maybe, not because bureaucrats are bad in character, constitution. Do you think that the corrupt bureaucrats are bad people by constitution? There is something inherently wrong in them? No, they are just normal people like any of us. They are from our family, our society, our neighborhood maybe. They are normally good people. But inside a bureaucratic situation, perhaps they normally become corrupt. What makes them corrupt? In order to understand that, forget about constitution, they are the bad people. No, they are just normal people like any of us. Let us try to understand what are the factors in bureaucracy which makes people corrupt. This is what this idea tries to understand, that. Identify those factors of the constitution, you can say the situation. So that is how we understand the social influence as a new paradigm. Now, if you look at social influence as a paradigm, then perhaps the most important research in this area was done during and after the Second World War. Second World War had given lots of fillip to such research, because Second World War has seen so much of evil that, well, it has created a lot of consternation among the mind that are people, human being, and that are people evil by nature? Or is it that we can say that evil is the result of some situational factor around us? If it is, how can we control those situational factors? What make people evil? Capable of doing such an evil act like the Holocaust, rape of Nanking, etc., etc. So let's talk about what was that historical background of this concept, its emergence, its popularity, its importance in the recent time. Because as you know that during Second World War, Holocaust happened. All of you are We have talked about that so many times that almost 6 million Jews were killed just because they were Jews, and almost an equal number of non-Jews also were killed because they were considered to be inferior people, people with low IQ, dumb people, or you can say the Romans and Slavs or deformed people, disabled people. So they were considered to be inferior people and they must be killed, bad people. So 12 million people were killed because they were considered to be bad for the Germanic race. They were killed. Now, after the Holocaust ended, and what about ended? Against the Germans surrendered, and the people of the Holocaust were liberated. Whatever the concentration camp they were left may survive maybe. Then after, all those people who were found guilty of Holocaust, they were tried in a international court of law at Nuremberg, at a place in Germany called Nuremberg. It is known as Nuremberg trial. A series of trials happened. Perhaps this is the most famous trial in the history of humanity, perhaps. So, the Nuremberg trial, as we call it. So, all those people, and these people were tried under a new crime that was defined there, was the crime against humanity. And they were given punishment according to the severity of their crime. Some of them were given death penalty also, hanged, and some of them were given life imprisonment or different periods of jail term, etc. Now that was the time during which there was one person who was quite a lot in debate and discussion, news debate and discussion, and his name was Adolf, well, not Hitler, Adolf Eichmann. His name was Adolf Eichmann. Now, have you, anybody, heard the name of Adolf Eichmann? Very few students in my physical classroom, when I ask this question, say, sir, I have heard about him. But he was a quite a lot person, talked about person in the, well, 1950s and 60s, after the Holocaust ended. Now, Adolf Eichmann was, if you look at it, Adolf Eichmann was the chief architect of Holocaust. He was sort of right-hand man of Hitler while doing the Holocaust. He was the senior most bureaucrat in that area, and his task was to create the whole bureaucratic machinery to execute the Holocaust, which made it possible. His job was that whenever his army, Hitler's army used to be, attack a new city and capture it, then his task was to go there, identify all the Jews living in that area, arrest them and send them to the nearest concentration camp for being killed. It is said that he was single-handedly responsible for the death of millions of people. He was the person who created the whole bureaucratic structure, system, machinery to do all these complex work and all. So, he was the, well, chief architect of Holocaust in that case, how Holocaust can be actually done. So, single-handedly he was guilty of, he was responsible for the death of maybe millions of people. Now, after the Holocaust ended and his crime came out in light, then many people in Europe started thinking that Adolf Eichmann cannot be a normal person like us. He must be a monster because we are the good people. We have such great grand moral standard in our life, again Kantian morality, Benthamian morality. So, we are so great people. Again, we have all the great ideas like mindfulness, self-awareness, self-control, empathy, compassion. So all these great ideas that we have inside us, constitutionally we are great people. We have seen in that class that we all have empathy which prevents us even for killing a single person also. So we all have that thing inside us which make us to be a good people. We are constitutionally good people. And when a person like Adolf Eichmann, he could kill so many people, millions of people, then he cannot be like us. He must be very different from us. He must be a bad person by constitution. So he must be something very special, he must be very bad person again. He was often called as monster of Europe. So monster type of person, that is, how can somebody kill 12 million people, millions of people, so can say ruthlessly in a way, without any compassion or empathy and all. So he was considered to be a sort of monster. Now after Holocaust ended, then somehow he could not be arrested. He fled Europe somehow and he was hiding somewhere in Argentina. In 1960 finally he was arrested by Mossad, the intelligence agency of Israel. And after arresting, he was taken to He was brought to Israel, Jerusalem, where he was tried under the same crime, well, under international law, crime against humanity. 2 years this trial of Adolf Eichmann took place. And after 2 years, well, when he was finally, you can say he was given finally death penalty and he was hanged, he was executed. He was the last person to be executed for Holocaust, to be hanged for Holocaust at Jerusalem. Last person to be given a death penalty in Jerusalem. Now, during that period, there was a philosopher in America, one of the most well-known philosophers of that time. There was a philosopher in America. She was also a reporter of the New York Times, and her name was Hannah Arendt. Her name was Hannah Arendt. Now, she was the person who, well, you can say, was by her, you can say, employer, the New York Times, given the task to go to Jerusalem and cover the trial of Adolf Eichmann. So she went there and she spent 2 years in Jerusalem while covering the Eichmann's, you can say, trial of Eichmann. Now, during this period, she undertook a personal project also. That as a philosopher, she tried to understand that what type of personality Adolf Eichmann had. Was he actually a monster? Was he actually constitutionally very different from all of us? So, if it is, then what were the characteristics of this person again? What were the qualities of that person? So, she tried to understand evil in us, evil inside us. So, what is the evil that this person had? Evil characteristics, evil bad. Was he actually Rakshas? Was he actually a monster? This is what she tried to find. So, for 2 years, she tried to understand him, what type of personality he had. Every day, she used to go there, talk to him, interview him, interact with him, sometimes observe him from outside. So, everything, that what type of life he is living. Is he something special? Is he very different from normal people like us? And after 2 years, when the trial was completed and he was given the death penalty finally, then she wrote a book on her experience with that person, on that interview, etc. And this book became one of the most famous book in this area that we are talking about today. Name of that book was Eichmann in Jerusalem, but this book is more famous by its subtitle. So, name of that book is Eichmann in Jerusalem with a subtitle, The Banality of Evil. The banality of evil. So, that is the this title of this subtitle, this concept of banality of evil was a very provocative concept. It created lots and lots of debate and controversy in the world at that time. Now, before we talk about the concept of the banality of evil, or before that, can you tell me that what is the meaning of the term banality, by the way? What are the banal things? Well, some of you may be aware of that. Banality basically means, or banal things are the ones which are banality basically means something that is very ordinary, something that is very commonplace, something that for which you don't have to look for. So, it can be found everywhere. You don't have to look where it is. No, you open your eyes and you get it. Such things are called banal, ordinary, commonplace, found to be found everywhere, without any effort, without any special, well, attention and all. They are called banal. Now, this idea of banality of evil, that evil is commonplace, evil is ordinary, well, it was a very controversial and provocative concept at that time. Now, before we talk about this provocation or controversy about that concept, let's talk about what did she actually find in that research. Now, she found in that research, first of all, that no, Adolf Eichmann was not a very special person. In every characteristics of the human constitution, he was just like any one of us. He had equal understanding, a very high understanding of the moral principle, all the moral principle, including the Kantian morality. He very well knew what was, of course, Kant was a German and he himself was a German. So, he was quite well aware of moral principles, including the Kantianism maybe. In fact, he had actually claimed that he was a Kantian. So, we will see that why did he claim so. But nobody perhaps can misunderstand Immanuel Kant the way he did. But he did claim that he is a Kantian person, he was a follower of Immanuel Kant. So, that is first thing that he did. So, he was quite well aware of the can say principles of morality like Kant. He was very high amount of self-awareness, mindfulness, self-control, empathy, compassion, everything was in him, as much as these things are there inside us. He did not have a lack of empathy. Remember, we have seen in the empathy class that people who are low in empathy, they are more likely to commit a crime. But he did not have that lack of empathy. In empathy and compassion, he was as good as any of us. His empathy profile would be equally good as that, or maybe better than many of us. He was a very normal family man. He used to love his family members. He wanted to spend his time with the family and all, the family, friends. So looking at him, his lifestyle, etc., he will not appear to be any different from any of us. He was just a normal person, ordinary person, commonplace person. Only thing special about him was that, she found, Hannah Arendt, only thing special about him was that he was a highly conscientious bureaucrat. He was a highly conscientious bureaucrat. What is the meaning of the term highly conscientious bureaucrat? Because if you look at the idea of the, can say, policy, let's take any policy of the government. Any policy has two important aspects. One aspect of the policy is to make a judgment whether the policy is good and bad, and second aspect of a policy is to implement that policy. Now, the idea of bureaucracy is that bureaucracy should not make a judgment about a policy. Who can make a judgment? Government can make a judgment. Or in a democracy, well, opposition can make a judgment and criticize the policy in the parliament, or media can make a judgment, or intellectuals can make a judgment, or common people like us can make a judgment. So we can support the government policy, maybe judging it to be good. We can criticize the policies of the government, judging it bad. So we can make a judgment. Bureaucrats cannot make a judgment. Bureaucrats' job is what? To implement the policy. So without making a judgment whether the policy is good and bad, whatever policy is handed over to a bureaucrat, he must ensure that it is properly implemented in the best possible manner. That is the whole idea of a bureaucrat, not to judge a policy, only implement it. Now, this idea of bureaucracy as an implementer of a policy, Adolf Eichmann had taken that to an extreme. He started thinking that as a bureaucrat, my job is not to make a judgment whether the policy is good and bad. My job is to simply implement that policy. So, Holocaust was a policy made by a government, and I as a bureaucrat was simply handed over that policy, and I simply implemented that. I did not do anything wrong in that case. Can you think of which part of Kantian theory he was referring to when he claimed that he was a Kantian? I hope all of you can think, may already have thought about it. It was duty of Kant. So he took up the duty that as a Kantian, again, my job was simply to follow our duty, perform my duty as a bureaucrat. I simply did that. I did not allow my inclination to interfere into that, whether I don't like it. So he removed his personal like. He became a sort of zombie in a way. So blindly you can say any policy that was given to him is simply implemented and without making a judgment whether it is good or is it bad. That is what he did. Well, that is what is the meaning of this term, that he was a highly conscientious bureaucrat. Now then after, she wrote a line in that book, Hannah Arendt. She wrote a line in that book that only a special thing about Adolf Eichmann was that he was an only extraordinary. This is the quote, the most famous quotation of that book. She wrote in that book that the most extraordinary thing about Adolf Eichmann was that he was an extraordinarily ordinary person. He was just like any of us, and that was the most extraordinary thing. Why was it most extraordinary thing that he was so ordinary? Well, extraordinary thing was that people thought that he must be a monster, only then he could do such an act. But if he was ordinary person, then perhaps any other ordinary person also can do a similar act. Become Adolf Eichmann and kill millions of people maybe. This is the meaning of the term banality of evil. Just as Adolf Eichmann was a banal person, an ordinary person, so any other ordinary person like me or you, for example, are capable of, well, committing as big an evil as the Holocaust. This created lots of debate in America at that time, because many people in America thought that Holocaust could have happened only in Germany, because Germans are bad people. They are the more authoritarian people. They thought that Holocaust cannot happen in America because Americans are great people. They talk about great ideas like liberty, human rights, dignity, equality, etc., etc. So Holocaust can never happen in America. But Hannah Arendt made that conclusion. No, Holocaust can very well happen in America. Only thing that we need is that a person like Hitler who can create a social situation, social influence, and we can find a million Adolf Eichmann in America as well. Adolf Eichmanns are everywhere. We all are potential Adolf Eichmann. Just think of it. Suppose tomorrow you become a bureaucrat and you are given an order by the government, go there and kill all the Jews in your area. How many of you think that you will follow that order? Now, when I ask this question in my class, then majority of the students say that no, sir, I will not do that. Very few students, maybe very, very rare, somebody says that, sir, I might possibly. Majority, 99% of the students say that no, sir, I will not do that. I hope that you also are as a representative of this number. But if you think that you cannot do it, then you will see that in this class and maybe a little of next class also, well, a lot of misconception that you have about yourself would be perhaps broken, might be broken, because our research tells us that, well, if you are in a situation of Adolf Eichmann, that at least 2/3 probability is that you might also commit the same thing. You might also have executed Holocaust. At least 2/3 probability is that. So ordinary people also can become a monster like Adolf Eichmann in a particular situation. Bureaucracy is that situation. So she said that bureaucracy is that situation in which good people also can commit an evil act without being bad. He was not a bad person as such. He was not a Rakshas. He was not a monster. He was just a normal person like any of us, a good people otherwise. But in that situation, he was able to commit an evil act as well. Social influence can make us into a zombie. We simply do without being. We can do evil without being bad. That is what Hannah Arendt found in that research. Social influence can be that powerful, it can be that strong. It can make us a normal people also to commit such heinous act like for example Holocaust and kill millions of people. Sometimes social influence can become inward also. Think of it. Have you heard the name of, say, Heaven's Gate? So, have you heard the name of Heaven's Gate? You may not have heard it, but you may have heard about a comet. This Heaven's Gate, it was a cult in America, and it was quite a lot in international news around 25 years ago, 97, 98. Now, that was the time you can see when there was a comet that was passing through the earth. The name of that comet, some of you may have heard about that, Hale Bob. So there was a comet called Hale Bob. It was passing through the earth. And well, this comet came very close to the earth. So close it came to the earth that many scientists were speculating that it might be captured by the gravity of the earth. Had it been captured by the gravity of the earth, it might have been collided with the earth and that might have ended life on the earth. Fortunately, that did not happen. That's why we are alive and we are preparing for the UPSC exam here. But this came very close to the earth. So close to the earth it came that it was visible from the naked eye. Indeed, it is perhaps the most spectacular thing that I have ever seen in my life in a evening sky, in the sky. That for 4 or 5 days in the evening, it was actually visible from, well, with the naked eye, without any telescope, with a long tail that he had. His tail was also visible from naked eye. That close it came to the earth. So that was, you can say, Hale Bob. Now, Heaven's Gate was a cult in America. And its leader, I think Michael Applewhite was the name of that cult leader. Now, he was the person who had a strong belief that suppose, for example, this, you can say, comet is passing through Earth like this one. And he thought that when this comet is at the closest approach to the Earth, at that point on the Earth, if anybody dies, then this person will be taken by that comet directly to the heaven. It is Heaven's Gate. And he commanded all his followers to commit mass suicide at that time, exactly on that time. and more than 200, 300 people committed suicide on that day and that time. Next day, when the American administration opened the gate of the, can say, Heaven's Gate, that cult, whose gate it was, gate of the cult, then they found that almost more than 200, 300 young people, all of them wearing new clothes, Nike shoes, with a travel bag with them, in which all the day-to-day travel, preferably their clothes, the, can say, the toothpaste, toothbrush, shaving kit, etc. All of these things properly packed in a bag, in a travel bag, and all of these people wearing new clothes, new shoes, etc. They all lied in a, can say, straight line, covered themselves with a cloth, white cloth, and they consumed poison and died, all of them. Now question is that, just imagine a situation. Suppose you are a member of such a cult and your leader tells you, your leader, in India we call them as guru, well, many cults are there in India also. Your guru tells you, your leader tells you that let's all commit suicide. How many of you think that you will commit suicide because your guru tells you to do that? Again, in my class, almost 99% of the students say, sir, I will not do that. But our research further tells us, I will not go into those research, but we have research data for that. Many research has been done, very innovative research has been done to study these phenomena. And our research tells us that again, 2/3 probability is that many of you might do the same. That could be the power of a social influence. So think of it. I hope that you remember a few years ago, a very strange event, very tragic event has happened in a place in Delhi, South Delhi, North Delhi, called Burari. Burari event, when 11 members of a family, they all committed suicide, well, for the same thing as some guru told them to do that. Question again is that all those people who committed suicide in Heaven's Gate on Burari family, were they bad people? No. Were they weak people, superstitious people? No. They were just common like any of us. So that Heaven's Gate, for example, after you can see it was found that all those people, 200, 300 people who committed suicide, they were not the tribal people, superstitious people, uneducated or illiterate people from village and all. No, they were highly educated people. Most of them were engineers working in Silicon Valley in the software industry. So they were part of the new industry. Highly educated young people, and they committed suicide because their boss told them to do that. And in that Burari family also, that the whole family, do you think that this family was very unique and special, very different from ours? Of course not. It was found that later on I read about that when you can say this case came out in light again, that the many journalists went to the neighbors to ask them what type of people were there. Were they very different? Almost everybody in the neighborhood said that no, they were just like normal people like us. There was nothing special about them. You could never imagine that they can commit such an act. They were going to commit such an act tomorrow maybe, or today maybe. Nobody knew that. Nobody believed that it can be done by such a way. They were so ordinary. Banality of evil. So the idea is that social influence can be so powerful that sometimes it can make us to kill millions of people like Adolf Eichmann, and it can make us to kill ourselves also like the members of Heaven's Gate or that Burari family. You can find many such examples like that, where Heaven's Gate can make good people extremely evil, do the evil act without being evil, and bad people also to commit sometimes an extraordinary act of altruism. Nobody can imagine that. Both of these them is possible. Social influence can be that powerful, that strong, that important for us. So that is how we understand the social influence. Now, in order to study social influence as a topic again, let me give you a brief, can say, taxonomy of the social influence here. Because if you look at social influence, then we often talk about two types of social influence. First is called conformity, and the second is called obedience. Then after, we have a special type of conformity called normative conformity, which we will discuss. There is other type also called informational conformity, which we will not discuss in our class, not very relevant for our topic. Normative conformity, and the second is called minority influence. A second, not I will say second, subtype of that. We call that as minority influence. So here we'll see that, so there are two types of conformity, two types of social influence, conformity and obedience, and a special type of conformity called normative conformity, and a subtype called minority influence. We will discuss normative conformity in some detail, minority influence also in some detail, and obedience very briefly. So this is how we are going to discuss about that. These things we will try to discuss cover in the next class after the break. Rest of that we will discuss in some later classes. So after that we will take a break, then after we will see the rest of that.